What is up, guys? This is Zach from Anglers Escape. Creek fishing has always been a passion of mine growing up. I've made lots of videos creek fishing, and today I want to make a really to-the-point video on how to go creek fishing, everything you need to bring, how to locate some good spots to fish, and then also some tips and tricks. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. What gear do you need to go creek fishing? So the first thing you need is the rod and reel. Really what I recommend is something that's light action. The fish usually aren't massive in these creeks, but there are a lot of them. So right here I have a 6-foot light action rod and reel. I actually got this from Dick's Sporting Goods for $15. It was a buy one get one for $30 on a Black Friday sale. But any light action rod, Walmart sells them, Amazon has some great light action rods. I get something around 6 foot because usually there's a lot of little trees. You don't want a really long pole sticking out there, and then the light action gives it a lot of play when you're fighting these smaller fish. Then what I do is rig it up with 4 to 8 pound test line. So right now I really like 4-pound test line. I have the drag set just right, so if I pull with about 3 pounds of force, it'll take out that drag. So 4 to 8 pound test line, usually just monofilament is your best bet. Now I want to show you what baits to bring. So one of my favorite is an inline spinner for strings. This worked for bluegill, sunfish, panfish, trout, bass, all kinds of things will hit an inline spinner. I really like Panther, Martin, and South Bend, and I'll put a link in the description for the Amazon links. But they're great little lures. Some other lures that I'd highly recommend that you pick up when you come down is small crankbaits and jigs. So let me go ahead and show you some of the small crankbaits. So right here I have a little grasshopper imitator. This is a really good one. You can see it's not really big. It's going to be more shallow diving. I have a Rebel, basically topwater popper, that I really like for this creek fishing. Again, really small. And then also jigs are an excellent bait to bring. So right here I have some trout magnets. These are one good jig. Again, pretty small jigs. Marabou jigs are also really good. I like them from 1/64 ounce to about 1/8 of an ounce. But these inline spinners, small crankbaits, and jigs, you can't go wrong. And then the best bait of all, guys, even better than the artificial lures, is going to be worms. So there's a reason why worms work so great, and that's because they're a really natural food source for these creeks. Every time it rains and floods, it's pushing out a bunch of worms into these waters, and that's what they're eating. So go to Walmart, pick yourself up a can of night crawlers or red wigglies. It's about $3 or $4 at Walmart. Go back to the sporting section. And then what you want to do is fish under a bobber, because you want to suspend that worm off the bottom. If it's sitting on the bottom, you're going to miss bites. So what you want to do is get a really small bobber. Then what you want to do under that, about 1 to 2 feet down, put a little bit of split shot, and it just helps weigh your worm down, especially if there's a little current. And then about another anywhere from 8 to 12 inches, I have a really small hook. So generally I like a hook size anywhere from size 12 to about a size 3 hook when I'm creek fishing. And whenever you're losing your bait, it's because one, your hook size is too big, or your bait size is too big. Because in creeks, those small little fish are really good at stealing baits. But real quick, I want to show you how I thread on. I just kind of thread the hook on as much as possible, as close as possible. And you don't need a ton of worm to catch these fish. I'll break it off right here. I don't want to have a huge piece sticking off that they can steal it. But that's all you really need for creek fishing. And then if I'm finding a deeper pocket that's, let's say, is 5 feet deep, back there it gets to about 4 feet. I'm usually fishing about 2 feet down. So I'm still 2 feet off the bottom, and I'm 2 feet down, have my split shot 6 to 8 inches up, and then my bobber. And this is a great setup. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll cast out with some worm, and then while that's sitting there and you're just waiting for something to take that worm, I'm taking my inline spinner and actively casting, and that inline spinner I'm just bringing in just quick enough so that blade spins. So my inline spinner one, again, all I have is this inline spinner tied directly to my rig, 4-pound test line. I'm just casting this out and slowly reeling it into where I see that blade spin. So these are some of the best baits. I want to show you guys some of the hooks that I get. I can also show you the link off Amazon. You can get 500 of these really small hooks that are great for trout, panfish, any small creek fish. And so anything, again, by size 3 to size 12 is a great deal. And this is like $5 or $6. The other thing I want to mention is sometimes telescopic rods can work really good for creeks. Sometimes when you're walking back there a ways, it gets hard with really long poles. So one of these that extend out a little ways is kind of nice once you get to your fishing spot. And so now I want to get into how to locate creeks. So the first thing you want to do to find a really good creek fishing spot is go to Google Maps. So growing up, I didn't realize how many creeks were right outside my door frame. Like here, this is about a 3-minute drive from my house. And you'd be surprised how many creeks could be in your area. Go to Google Maps, go to satellite images, see if you can find some going through different areas, and then look for public access points. And once you find a good creek, you want to have some good shoes So right here I have some good water shoes. I like these sandals because they're closed-toed. You never know what you might step on some creeks. Or I have fishing waders is another good bet to go with. But once you find the creek and you get to your creek fishing spots, I usually have a bucket or like a fishing backpack with all my gear. So my baits, my poles, I have a small tackle box with those lures I showed you. And then I take off and start walking down the creek until I find some areas that have deeper water. Because right here, where it's pretty shallow, there's not going to be any fish. It's only about 6 to 8 inches deep. Then you hit deeper pockets where it gets deeper to like 3 or 4 feet, and that's where the fish are going to be hiding out. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of hiking up and down these creeks, and usually you find at creek bends in different areas, every like 100 yards you travel, you'll find another deep pocket that holds fish. And you'd be surprised by how many fish are in these creeks, because there's a ton of food density for these fish to feed on. For one, there's bugs from all these overhanging trees that are falling down into there, giving them a huge food source. There's a bunch of worms going into the area. So there's a lot more food than just lakes per area. So that's why creeks can be really successful. The other thing is, don't be surprised if you find some pretty big fish in creeks, because a lot of local ponds and lakes will have overflow into the creek system. So every year after the thunderstorms and like some heavy rains, at least in Missouri, I find that creek fishing really kicks up, because a lot of ponds and lakes upstream are actually flushing fish out into the creek system, and then I'm catching a lot more. So these are a few tips and tricks. The other thing I want to mention actually, guys, is the season. So May, and especially Missouri, for me, May through September are the best months for creek fishing. When it gets really cold, they kind of go into hiding, and over winter, a lot of this actually freezes over and you're not going to have any luck. But May through September, especially in May or late April after that first big thunderstorm, I have a ton of luck. So guys, I really hope this helps you catch some fish. And as always, best of luck fishing.